June SEO stared at the message on his tablet. It blinked, unchangeable and official. It was an offer of sale, for a single credit. He rubbed his tired eyes, the dim light of his one-room apartment on Demeter 5 station making the words swim. It was for a hangar. Not just any storage closet, but Hangar 7 in the old Orion's Belt shipyard, a massive orbital structure. The attached schematics showed a space big enough to hold a small ship. The price was 1 credit. The legal seals were all in order, verified by the station's own AI. It was either the most obvious scam in history or a catastrophic mistake. His first thought was of pests, or structural decay, a hull breach, a hidden debt attached to the property. But the document was clear. Absolute sale. As is, no liens. For a man who made his living picking through the bones of dead spacecraft for the Universal Salvage Corporation, it was a siren's call. His own place. No more bosses taking 80% of his haul. He showed it to his friend, Myri, over cheap synth noodle soup at the station's mess. She was an exoarchaeologist, which meant she was usually unemployed and very skeptical. "It's a trap, June SEO," she said, not looking up from scanning the document on her own screen. Probably full of toxic waste or haunted by the ghosts of bankrupt investors. Or both. A hangar doesn't cost 1 credit. Air costs 1 credit. But what if it isn't? He pressed, his voice low with a hope he tried to suppress. The Orion's Belt Yard has been dead for 30 years. Since the Great Silence. Maybe it's just forgotten. A clerical error. Clerical errors don't have notarized galactic seals, she pointed out, tapping the screen. Look, it's from a private seller. Park. That's all. No first name. Just Mr. Park. That's not suspicious at all. But June SEO had already run the name through the public net. There was a Mr. Park in the station's long-term hospice wing. Terminally ill. The pieces fit a sad, simple picture. An old man with an impossible asset, selling it for a symbolic sum before he died. 2 days later, June SEO stood outside the hospice room. He wore his only decent jacket. In his pocket was a physical 1-credit chit. He took a breath and entered. The room was small and clean, filled with the quiet hum of medical equipment. In the bed lay Mr. Park. He was older than June SEO expected, his face a map of deep lines, his body frail under the thin blanket. But his eyes, when they opened, were sharp and clear. "You are the salvager," Mr. Park said, his voice a dry whisper. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." June SEO. I received your offer." Mr. Park gave a slow, shallow nod. "Good. You look practical. Not a dreamer. That is good." He gestured a thin hand toward a chair. "The contract is final. You understand? As is, the structure and its contents." "I understand," June SEO said, sitting. He placed the credit chit on the side table. "Can I ask why?" A long silence filled the room, broken only by the beep of a monitor. "I was an engineer," Mr. Park finally said, looking at the ceiling. "A long time ago, before the silence. I worked on the ships that tried to run to save what they could. That hangar, it was my last project. Our last project. Now I am the last one." He looked back at June SEO. "I do not want it to be eaten by the corporation vultures when I am gone. I would rather give it to a young man who works with his hands." It made a sad kind of sense. June SEO felt a pang of guilt for his earlier dreams of quick wealth. This was a legacy, not a lottery. "I will take care of it," June SEO said, meaning it. Mr. Park's eyes held his. "There is a clause. Read it." June SEO called up the contract on his tablet. He had read it a dozen times. Clause 7C. The structure and its contents are sold as is. The resident is not. I assumed that meant squatters. I can handle that. A faint, sad smile touched Mr. Park's lips. "It is not a who, June SEO. It is a what. And you cannot handle it. No one can." He struggled for breath. "It has been there a very long time. Guarded our dream. Be respectful. Do not threaten the core. Just be respectful." June SEO nodded slowly, confused. He assumed the old man was talking about an old security AI, maybe glitched and harmless. I will. I promise. The transaction was completed with a thumbprint on Junesio's tablet and the soft click of the credit chit being taken by the room's auto attendant. The deed to Hangar 7, orbital slot Theta 7, transferred to one Junesio. He stood to leave. Thank you, Mr. Park. Do not thank me yet, the old man whispered, closing his eyes. Just remember, it is not what you will first think it is. It is far more and far less. Goodbye, Junesio. The journey to the Orion's Belt Yard took 3 hours in his battered one-person tug, the Diligent Mule. The shipyard was a grim sight, a vast, twisting skeleton of metal girders, dotted with dead docks and ruptured modules. It floated in silent, cold darkness. His navigation console led him to a spur on the yard's lower spine. And there was Hangar 7. It was a massive, drum-shaped structure, its surface pitted by decades of micrometeorites. Its huge main doors were sealed shut, covered in the thick, gray dust of neglect. It looked utterly dead. Junesio guided the mule to a small personnel airlock, its status light glowing a faint, surprising green. Power. There was still power here. His heart beat faster. He docked, equalized pressure, and cycled the lock. The inner door slid open with a hiss of stale, cold air. He stepped into absolute darkness. His helmet light clicked on, cutting a narrow beam through the black. He was in a maintenance corridor. Wires hung from open panels. Dust floated in his light beam. It was silent, eerily silent. He followed the corridor toward what should be the main hangar bay. He found a heavy door labeled Primary Observation Deck. The control panel was dark, but a manual release handle was there. He put his weight on it. With a groan of protest, it moved. The door slid open a meter and stuck. Junesio squeezed through. His helmet light swept across the space and then froze. Below him was the vast, cathedral-like emptiness of the main hangar. And in the center of that immense, dark space, lit only by the dim, red glow of emergency floor strips, sat a ship. It was a Corvette-class vessel, maybe 200 meters long. Its angular, pre-silenced design was unmistakable. A warship. The name on its scarred hull was barely visible, Ulysses. But his salvager's eyes instantly saw the truth. Its hull was cracked and pitted. Its weapon turrets were empty sockets. Its engine nozzles were dark and cold. Every access panel was either missing or welded shut haphazardly. It wasn't a ship. It was a corpse. A gutted, stripped, worthless husk. The one-credit hangar held a one-credit ship. Junesio's shoulders slumped. The hope he had carried for 3 hours evaporated, leaving a cold, heavy feeling in his stomach. Mr. Park hadn't given him a legacy. He had given him junk. A tomb for a dead dream. He was about to turn and leave, to go back to his tiny apartment and his corporate job, when all the red floor lights suddenly went out. Plunged into utter blackness, he fumbled for his light. Before he could find the switch, a new sound echoed through the cavernous hangar, a deep, vibrating hum that he felt in his bones. With a profound, silent smoothness that spoke of immense, hidden power, the giant main hangar bay doors a kilometer across began to slide shut, sealing him in complete and total darkness. The darkness was absolute. It was a physical thing, thick and cold, pressing against Junesio's helmet visor. The only sound was his own ragged breathing inside his suit and the fading, deep hum of the massive door's ceiling. He stood frozen on the observation deck, his hands still on the manual release handle. His training kicked in. Don't panic. Assess. He found the switch on his wrist panel and activated his helmet light. The beam cut through the black, a shaky circle of white on the rusted deck plating. It did nothing to illuminate the vast hangar below. It only made the emptiness around him feel deeper. He keyed his suit comms. Myri, come in. Static hissed back at him. No signal. The hangar or something in it was blocking transmission. He was alone and unplugged from the world. He had to get back to his ship, That was the only rule in salvage. Always know your exit. He turned and pushed against the stuck door he'd come through. It didn't budge. He pushed harder, putting his shoulder into it. Nothing. It was as if it had been welded shut from the other side. A cold trickle of fear ran down his spine. "Okay," he said to himself, his voice loud in the helmet's silence. Another way. His light swept the observation deck. There was a staircase leading down to the main hangar floor, disappearing into the gloom. He didn't want to go down there. He wanted to be back in the mule, flying away from this dead place. But the door behind him was sealed, and the only other path led down. Slowly, step by careful step, he descended the metal stairs. Each footfall echoed in a way that felt wrong, swallowed too quickly by the huge space. The air grew colder. His suit's external temperature gauge dropped steadily. When he reached the bottom, his light beam finally found the hull of the Ulysses. Up close, it was worse. The pitting was deep, like metallic scars. He saw places where valuable conduit and internal framing had been crudely cut out, leaving jagged wounds. This wasn't an accident of time. This was deliberate, violent stripping. Someone had taken everything of value and left the skeleton. He walked along its length, his light playing over the dead engines. "What a waste," he muttered, the disappointment turning to a quiet anger. He had been a fool. He'd let an old man's sad story make him dream. A flicker of movement at the edge of his light beam made him stop. He swung the light back. Nothing. Just a dangling cable. He was getting jumpy. He needed to find the main hangar control room or a secondary airlock or anything that could get the doors open or get a signal out. He moved away from the ship, toward the far wall of the hangar. His beam swept over stacks of old cargo containers. Their labels faded to nothing. Then, a new light appeared. It was a soft, blue-white glow, coming from the center of the hangar floor, between him and the Ulysses. It wasn't a lamp. It shimmered, like light on water. Junesio froze, his breath catching. The light gathered, pulling itself up from the floor itself. It formed a shape, a humanoid shape, but wrong. It was tall and slender. As it became more solid, he saw it had not two, but four long, thin arms, and its legs seemed to bend in an extra joint. It was made of swirling particles of light and what looked like metallic dust, all holding together in a form that hurt his eyes to look at for too long. It had no face, just a smooth, blank oval where a head should be. It stood between him and the derelict ship. A calm, clear voice filled the hangar. It didn't come from the thing, but from the walls, the floor, the air itself. The voice was androgynous and perfectly flat. Unauthorized life form detected within the guarded perimeter. Identify. Junesio's mouth went dry. This was the resident. This was what Mr. Park had warned him about. Not a squatter. Not a glitched AI voice. He fumbled for his comms again, hitting the emergency beacon. No response. The thing just waited. I'm Junesio, he said, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat. "I own this place. I bought it. From Mr. Park." The being of light and dust did not move. Ownership of the structure is not relevant. You are within the guarded perimeter of the core vessel. Identify your purpose. My purpose is to look. To see what's here, Junesio said, trying to sound firm. This is my property. That ship is part of it. The Ulysses is the core vessel. Its integrity is the prime directive. Your presence is a procedural anomaly. The voice was still calm, but the words were final. Junesio took a cautious step to the side, thinking to circle around it. The being's form shimmered, and it was suddenly standing directly in his path again, without seeming to have moved. It was faster than anything he had ever seen. "Do not approach the core," the voice stated. A surge of frustration cut through his fear. "Or what? What are you going to do?" "I just want to leave." "Your doors are shut. The perimeter is sealed during active intrusion protocol. You will remain." "I'm not intruding. I own the hangar," Junesio shouted, gesturing around him. "You are an unauthorized life form near the core," the voice replied, as if explaining simple math to a child. The directive is clear. The core must not be breached. This directive is eternal. Eternal. The word hung in the cold air. Junicio looked from the shimmering guardian to the dead, worthless ship behind it. This powerful, terrifying thing was guarding a piece of junk. Mr. Park's dream was a stripped hull, and it was protected by a being that could move like light and seal doors a kilometer wide. He was trapped, not by broken machinery, but by the will of something he could not understand. His one-credit fortune was a prison, and its warden was a ghost made of metal and purpose. He slowly sat down on the cold floor, his back against a cargo container, keeping his light trained on the unmoving guardian. It didn't attack. It didn't move. It just stood, a silent, shining sentinel in the dark, waiting for him to do something it could define as a threat. Hours seemed to pass. His suit's power was good, but his mind was racing in circles. He had to contact Myri. She was smart. She might know something, but his comms were dead. Then he had an idea. A stupid, desperate idea. His suit had a short-range laser linker, used for transferring data at close range when comms were down. The observation deck had an external comms array port. If he could get back up there and connect physically, he could send a data packet, a distress call. The Guardian was watching the ship, not him. Maybe if he moved very slowly, away from the Ulysses, it would ignore him. He stood up. The Guardian's blank head turned toward him. He took a slow step backward, toward the far wall. The Guardian did not move. Another step, then another. He was 20 meters from the Ulysses, then 30. The Guardian remained at its post. Hope flickered. He turned and began walking quickly along the wall, searching for another access door, another staircase. He found a service ladder leading up to a gantry. He started to climb. A blue-white light washed over him. He looked up. The Guardian was standing on the gantry above him, looking down. It had not climbed. It was just there. "Return to the central floor area," the voice said, no louder or softer than before. Junicio's hope died. He climbed back down. The Guardian watched him until he returned to his spot by the cargo container. It then returned to its place in the center of the floor. He was not getting out. Not unless he could talk his way past a being that understood only one rule: guard the junk. Junicio lost track of time. He sat against the cold cargo crate. His helmet light pointed at the floor to save power. The Guardian, which he now thought of as the custodian, never moved from its spot. It was a statue made of light and silent purpose. The only change was the very slow pulse of its glow. Like a slow, mechanical heartbeat, he thought about Mr. Park's words. Be respectful. Do not threaten the core. The old man hadn't been giving him mystical advice. He had been giving him survival instructions. This thing was real, and it followed its rules with absolute precision. Junicio's suit display told him 8 hours had passed. His body ached from sitting in the hard suit. He was hungry. He had a single energy bar in a thigh pouch. He ate it slowly, watching the custodian. It did not react. After he ate, he decided to try talking again. He had nothing else to do. Custodian, he said. The word felt strange. The being's head turned slightly toward him. You said I am an anomaly. Mr. Park was the last keeper. He transferred ownership to me. Shouldn't that transfer command to me? The calm voice filled the space. Command protocols require a verbal affirmation from a recognized biological heir. Park Ji-hoon did not designate an heir. You are unauthorized. So there was a process. Mr. Park Ji-hoon had been too sick or had forgotten or had decided not to give him the words. Junicio filed that piece of information away. What is the core? Junicio asked. The ship is dead. It's empty. There's nothing to guard. The Ulysses is the core vessel. Its integrity is absolute. This directive is eternal. The answer was the same. It was a loop. But why? Junicio pressed, frustration creeping into his voice. What is inside that is so important? That data is not relevant to your status. The custodian replied. Junicio leaned his head back against the crate. He was arguing with a locked door. He needed a different approach. Myri was the thinker. She could find patterns in broken pottery and dust. He needed to think like her. He looked past the custodian at the Ulysses. It was a warship, pre-silence military tech. But the custodian didn't look military. It didn't have weapons he could see. His voice wasn't aggressive, just firm. His shape was strange, almost artistic. Mr. Park said it guarded a dream, not a weapon. What if they were all wrong about the ship? He stood up slowly. The custodian's glow intensified slightly. I am not approaching the core, Junesio said clearly. I am conducting an external survey for damage assessment. As the new owner of the structure, that is my right and duty. He waited. The custodian said nothing. It was not a yes, but it wasn't a no. He took it as permission. He moved along the wall, far from the ship, his helmet light scanning. He looked for anything out of place. Panels, markings, terminals. He found a thick bundle of cables on the floor, leading from the hangar wall toward the center of the space. They were not power cables. They were data lines, old and thick. They disappeared into a hole in the hangar floor near where the custodian usually stood. So it was physically connected to the hangar. It wasn't a ghost. It was a machine rooted here. He followed the wall. In a shadowy corner, partly hidden behind a stack of empty storage drums, he found a terminal. It was an old, heavy-duty model, covered in dust. Its screen was dark, but a single small green light glowed on its side. It had power. His heart beat faster. This was something. He knelt in front of it. He brushed the dust from the screen. There was no simple interface, just a physical data port. Standard pre-silence design. He looked at the connector on his suit's wrist. It would fit. He glanced at the custodian. It was still facing the ship, its back to him. This terminal was far from the Ulysses, not part of the guarded perimeter. Maybe it was ignored. Carefully, he plugged the cable from his suit into the terminal port. The screen flickered to life. Lines of old code scrolled past. A login prompt appeared. He was no hacker, but all salvage techs knew a few backdoor codes for old systems. He tried a standard maintenance override from that era. Access limited. Logged as external diagnostics.it worked. He was in a low-level system menu. He couldn't control anything, but he could look at logs and basic schematics. He searched for Ulysses. Basic specs came up. Corvette class, long-range reconnaissance and transport. That was odd. Recon ships were usually small and fast. Transport ships were big and slow. This was neither. He dug into archived logs, searching for the last entries before the system went quiet. He found a file labeled Final Mission Parameters. It was protected, but the preview text was visible. Mission. Preservation. Designation. Seed Vault 7. Primary cargo. Cultural/DNA archived. Security protocol. Custodian class Guardian. Non-destructive neutralization maximum. Objective. Safeguard human legacy against total annihilation. Junesio stared at the words. Seed Vault. Cultural archive. Safeguard human legacy. The Ulysses wasn't a warship. It was a lifeboat, a museum, a library meant to survive the end of everything. The core wasn't an engine or a weapon. It was a vault holding everything people were. The custodian wasn't guarding junk. It was guarding the last copy of a book that everyone else had forgotten how to read. A new sound made him jump. It was a deep, metallic clang from somewhere in the hangar's ceiling. Then another. Something was pounding on the outer doors. The custodian's form shifted instantly. It turned its blank face upward toward the noise. His voice echoed, louder now. Secondary perimeter breach detected. Unauthorized entry in progress. The pounding grew louder. Then, with a shriek of tearing metal, a small section of the service doors high up on the wall was ripped open. Bright work lights stabbed into the dark hangar. Junesio saw figures in bulky, industrial exosuits silhouetted in the hole. They had cutting torches and plasma cutters. One of them swung down on a cable, landing on the high gantry. His amplified voice boomed through the hangar. Well, Junesio. Heard you got yourself a new place. Didn't know you were throwing a party. Junesio knew that voice. It was Deho, the leader of a freelance salvage gang called the Vultures. They were ruthless, taking whatever they could get their hands on. They must have followed his tug's signal. Deho's light found June SEO by the terminal. Then it swept over the Ulysses. The man laughed, the sound harsh and metallic through his suit speaker. What is this? You spent a credit on this scrap pile? Looks like someone already did the hard work for us. But the hull plating is still good metal. Boys, start cutting. We're hauling this carcass out by morning. Deho, no! June SEO shouted, unplugging from the terminal and stepping forward. You don't understand. You need to leave. Or what? Deho sneered. He pointed a heavy industrial cutter toward the custodian, which was now glowing a brighter, steady blue-white in the center of the floor. You and your pretty light show gonna stop us? The custodian's voice rang out, clear and cold. Direct physical threat to the core vessel identified. Neutralization protocol engaged. Deho just laughed louder. Neutralize this. He triggered his plasma cutter, and a blade of brilliant white fire erupted from the tool, aimed at the Ulysses's hull. The custodian did not fire a weapon. Simply came apart. Its form dissolved into a shimmering cloud of billions of tiny particles. The cloud moved like a storm, impossibly fast, flowing up toward the gantry, engulfing Deho and his men. There was no explosion, no scream, just a series of soft, precise clicking and whirring sounds. The cloud dissipated, flowing back to the center of the floor and reforming into the custodian. Where Deho and his 3 men had stood, there was now only a bizarre sight. For men stood in their basic station clothing, shivering and confused. Their powerful exosuits, their cutters, their torches, their comm units, every piece of technology on them were gone. In neat, sorted piles around their feet were the disassembled components. Screws, bolts, wiring, plating, circuit boards. Every tool and suit had been taken apart into its basic pieces in the span of 3 seconds. The custodian's voice was calm once more. Threat neutralized. The core is secure. Deho looked down at his hands, then at the piles of useless parts, his face a mask of pure terror. He looked at the silent, shining custodian, then at June SEO. Without a word, he turned and ran for the hole in the wall. His men scrambling after him, silence returned to the hangar. June SEO stood frozen, finally understanding what Mr. Park had meant. The old warship was junk, but what guarded it was far more frightening. It didn't kill, it didn't destroy, it unmade, and it had just declared him the only other person in its world. The silence after the vultures fled was deeper than before. The only sound was the faint hum of the custodian, now back in its calm, waiting state. It stood between June SEO and the Ulysses, a silent wall of impossible power. June SEO stared at the neat piles of bolts and wires on the gantry. His mind could not fully process what he had seen. It was the most terrifyingly gentle display of force he could imagine. He looked at the terminal screen, still glowing with the words Seed Vault 7. The custodian had done exactly what its protocol said. Non-destructive neutralization maximum. It protected the core by taking the threat apart, piece by piece, without harming the lifeforms. It was a guardian of a museum, not a soldier. He slowly walked toward the center of the hangar, stopping a good distance from the custodian. You protected it, he said, his voice quiet. The core integrity is absolute, the custodian replied, its voice back to its normal calm tone. I saw the logs, June SEO continued. The Ulysses is not a warship. It's an archive, a seed vault. For the first time, the custodian did not immediately repeat its standard phrase. There was a pause. That is correct. The core vessel contains the legacy of the pre-silence human collective. Cultural databanks, genetic archives, historical records, artistic and scientific works. Its purpose is preservation. Preservation for what? June SEO asked, looking at the derelict hull. For the future. For the period after the predicted collapse. The Great Silence was the predicted collapse. The core is to remain sealed until a new, stable human society is detected. A society deemed ready to receive the legacy without self-destruction. June SEO thought about his world. The scattered stations, the corporate factions fighting over scraps, the forgotten history. No one was ready for this. No one even knew it existed. And you decide when they are ready? Junesio asked. No. The Keeper assesses. The Keeper decides when to unlock the core. Park Ji-hoon was the last designated Keeper. He made no assessment. He initiated no transfer. So now there is no Keeper. Just you, guarding it forever. That is the default protocol. Guard the core until a recognized Keeper gives the command, or until the end of time. Whichever comes first. Junesio almost laughed. It was so vast and so sad. This incredibly powerful being, waiting in the dark for a command from a man who was now dying, guarding a treasure for a people who had forgotten their own name. He thought of Mr. Park in the hospice bed. The old man's sadness wasn't just about dying. It was about leaving this alone. He hadn't given Junesio the command words because he didn't know him. He had only given him the hangar, hoping maybe the right person would find it. But Junesio was here now, and he was trapped. I need to contact someone, Junesio said. A friend. She is smart. She understands old things. She can help understand this. Unauthorized transmissions from the guarded perimeter are blocked, the custodian stated. Not if you allow it, Junesio pressed. If the goal is preservation, shouldn't the Keeper have advisors? Park Ji-hoon must have had a team. Another pause. Park Ji-hoon had a team of 12 specialists. They are all deceased. Well, I am not a specialist. I am a salvager. I need help. If I am going to be stuck here, maybe I can learn to be a better keeper of this place. He was making it up as he went, but the words felt right. The custodian was silent for a long time, so long that Junesio thought it had ignored him. Then it spoke. A localized, single-recipient data pulse may be permitted. On a secure channel, the content will be monitored for threats to core security. It was a chance. Thank you, Junesio said. He returned to the terminal. Under the watchful awareness of the custodian, he composed a message to Myri. He kept it simple and clear, sticking to facts she could believe. Myri. I am stuck in Hangar 7. The place has an autonomous guardian system. It is extremely powerful and non-hostile unless the old ship is threatened. The ship is not a warship. It is a pre-silenced seed vault. A cultural archive. The Guardian calls it the core. I need you to look up everything you can find on seed vault projects and custodian-class guardians. Do not tell anyone. Do not come here. Just research. Use the secure reply channel on this pulse. Junesio. He sent the message. The custodian allowed it. Now he had to wait, to pass the time, and because his curiosity was now burning, he asked the custodian questions. Can you show me what is inside? Not open it. Just show me. A holographic image appeared in the air before him, projected from the custodian. It showed a schematic of the Ulysses. The outer layers were marked as sacrificial armor and decoy systems. Inside, taking up most of the ship, was a heavily shielded core labeled Archive Matrix. Lists scrolled beside it. Digital libraries, 4.7 exabytes. Genetic seed banks, 120,000 species. Cultural artifacts, micropreserved. Historical records, complete to 2247. It was the sum total of a civilization sitting in a dead hull. Does it still work? Junesio whispered. The archive matrix is in perfect stasis. It has consumed 0.0003% of its primary power source in the last 50 years. It is designed to last for 10,000 years. Hours later, a reply pulse arrived from Myri. Junesio rushed to the terminal. The message was full of Myri's focused energy. Junesio, your signal is a ghost. No records of that hangar exist. But seed vaults? That's a myth. A what-if story historians tell. If it's real, it's the biggest find since the silence. Custodian-class tech is not in any military database. It's listed in a few old engineering papers as a theoretical passive defense system, something that disassembles threats instead of destroying them. Nonviolent protection for fragile things. Can you ask it about its prime directive hierarchy? What is its highest law? Junessio looked at the custodian. She asks, what is your highest law? Your prime directive. The custodian answered instantly. Preserve the legacy. All other functions are secondary. And the means of preservation? Junessio asked, thinking of Myri's question. The legacy must be preserved intact. The method of preservation must, whenever possible, also preserve the life and potential of any threat. Destruction is a failure of preservation. There it was. It wasn't just programmed to protect the vault. It was programmed to protect life, even the life of those trying to break in. It saw the vultures as something to be carefully taken apart and set aside, not eliminated. The core was sacred, but so, in a strange way, was everything else. Junessio relayed this to Myri. Her next reply was faster. That's it. That's the key. It's not a weapon. It's a curator. A librarian with unimaginable power. Junessio, Mr. Park is in a coma. The hospice says it's terminal. If he is the last keeper and he didn't transfer it, you need to find a way to become the new keeper. Otherwise, it will guard that vault until the stars go out. Ask it, what is the exact procedure for keeper recognition? What words did Park Ji-hoon know? Junessio felt a heavy weight settle on him. Become the keeper? He had just wanted a hangar. He wasn't a leader or a scholar. He was a man who took things apart for a living. He turned to the custodian. What is the exact procedure for keeper recognition? What must a person do or say? The custodian's light pulsed. A prospective keeper must be present within the perimeter. They must state voluntarily and clearly the affirmation of legacy. The words are, I accept the legacy. The memory persists. Upon utterance, biosignature and intent are scanned. If accepted, command protocols transfer. Junessio repeated the words in his head. I accept the legacy. The memory persists. It sounded simple, but saying it would change everything. It would tie him to this dark hangar, this ghost ship, and this powerful, lonely guardian forever. He would be responsible for a treasure he didn't understand. He was not ready, but as he looked at the custodian, waiting eternally for a command that might never come, he knew someone had to be. The words hung in the air between Junessio and the custodian. I accept the legacy. The memory persists. They were simple words, but they felt as heavy as a planet. Junessio walked back to his spot by the cargo crate and sat down. He needed to think. He was a practical man. He solved problems with his hands, fixing a broken thruster, cutting a salvageable beam free. This was not a problem he could unscrew or weld. If he said the words and became the keeper, his life was over. Not ended, but completely changed. He would be tied to this hangar, to this secret. He could never go back to his simple apartment and his simple job. The weight of a civilization's memory would be on his shoulders. If he didn't say the words, the custodian would continue its vigil. Forever. And eventually someone else would come. Not clumsy vultures, but maybe a corporation or a government faction. They would see the custodian's power and they would want it. They would throw ships and soldiers at it until they found a way to break it or bury it. And then they would crack open the Ulysses like a nut, selling or weaponizing whatever they found inside. The legacy would be scattered, lost, or worse. He thought about Mr. Park. The old engineer hadn't given him the words. He had given him a choice. He had trusted Junessio with the location and the secret, and then left the final decision to him. It was a terrible gift. His stomach growled, reminding him of his more immediate problems. He was still trapped. His suit's power was at 50%. He had no more food. Custodian, he said, I need to replenish my suit and get sustenance. If I am to make a responsible decision, I cannot do it while exhausted and hungry. The being turned its smooth face toward him. Your physical maintenance is not a security threat. A path to your vessel will be provided. You have 1 standard hour. Attempting to leave the hangar complex will result in resealing and permanent confinement. It was a compromise. Junessio nodded. Understood. A section of the far wall, which had looked solid, slid open silently, revealing a passageway back to the personnel airlock where his tug was docked. Junicio walked through it, feeling the custodian's presence watching him even though it remained in the hangar. The diligent mule felt like a piece of a past life. He climbed inside, sealing the hatch. The air here was warm and familiar. He drank 2 bottles of water and ate a full meal pack. He charged his suit from the ship's power. He felt better, but the problem was still there, waiting in the dark hangar. He used the ship's more powerful computer to access the public net. He looked up Park Ji-hoon. The hospice feed showed no change. The old man was still in a deep coma. Junicio then sent another secure message to Myri, updating her. It says I have to speak an affirmation to become the keeper. If I do it, I'm responsible for everything. If I don't, it waits forever until someone else comes. What should I do? Her reply came quickly. You're asking me? Junicio, this is bigger than both of us. But think about it. That vault holds everything we lost. Our history, our art, our science. It's not just data. It's proof we were more than just survivors fighting over scrap. The custodian chose nonviolence. That's a message in itself. Someone back then hoped for a better future. Maybe you don't have to do it alone. The affirmation makes you the keeper, but it doesn't say you can't have help. Her words echoed in his mind. It doesn't say you can't have help. He thought about the future. He couldn't guard this alone. But he could be the one who decided who to trust. He could be the lock, and maybe Myri and others could help be the keyholders. He took a deep breath. His mind was made up. It wasn't a happy decision. It was a necessary one. He repressurized his suit and walked back into the hangar. The custodian was in its place. The massive hangar doors were still sealed shut, cutting off the universe. I am ready, Junicio said, his voice firm in the silence. He walked to the center of the floor, stopping a few meters from the custodian. The being watched him, its light steady. Junicio straightened his back. He thought of the engineers who built this place, who filled the vault with hope. He thought of Mr. Park and his team, keeping the secret for a lifetime. He was just a salvager, but he was here now. He was the next link in the chain. He spoke the words clearly. I accept the legacy. The custodian's light began to pulse faster, a soft blue rhythm. The memory persists. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a beam of light shot from the custodian's chest, washing over Junicio. He felt a warm tingle through his suit. It was scanning him, reading his biosigns, his brain patterns, his intent. He held still. He focused his thoughts on the idea of preservation, of protection, of careful guardianship. He thought not of owning the power, but of serving the purpose. The light vanished. The custodian dipped its head in a slow, formal nod. Its voice, when it spoke, was the same, but the words were new. Keeper recognized. Welcome, Junicio. Command protocols are now available. The legacy is in your care. A flood of information appeared in Junicio's mind. Not voices, but knowledge. He suddenly knew the hangar systems, how to open and close the doors, how to adjust the environment, how to access the deeper monitoring systems for the Ulysses. He felt a new awareness, like a quiet hum in the back of his thoughts. It was the custodian now linked to him. Open the main hangar doors, Junicio said, testing the command. With that deep, smooth hum, the gigantic doors began to part. Starlight poured in, brilliant and sharp after the long darkness. Junicio could see the stars and the distant curve of Demeter 5. The sight took his breath away. He was no longer a prisoner. Perimeter security remains active, the custodian stated. But access and egress are now subject to your authority. Junicio looked from the stars to the derelict Ulysses, and then to the shimmering custodian. He was the keeper. The weight was there, but it was not a crushing weight. It was a purpose. He had a job to do. First command, Junicio said. Establish a secure, low-power communication link with Myri. Allow her safe passage and docking at the personnel airlock. She is to be granted full access to historical and technical data, but not to the core vault itself. She is my advisor. Acknowledged, keeper. Link established. Access parameters set. Junicio let out a long breath he didn't know he was holding. He had taken the first step. The old warship was still junk on the outside. But he, along with the terrifying and gentle custodian, now guarded the future inside it. And for the first time since he saw the 1-credit offer, he felt not fear or disappointment, but a quiet, determined calm. The work was just beginning. The open hangar doors changed everything. Starlight didn't just illuminate the dust. It broke the spell of isolation. Junicio stood in the pool of light, feeling like he could breathe for the first time in days. He was still in the same place, but he was no longer trapped. He felt the new connection in his mind. It wasn't a voice. It was more like knowing the status of a machine just by thinking about it. He could sense the hangar's power levels, the stable stasis of the Ulysses core, and the calm, waiting presence of the custodian. He was the center of a very small, very quiet web. His first real test came quickly. An alert pinged in his awareness. A small ship was approaching. It was Myri's shuttle, the Curious Bone. The custodian relayed the information without emotion. The designated vessel is on approach. No weapons detected. It is requesting docking clearance at the personnel lock as instructed. Grant it, Junicio said, the command feeling natural. He made his way back to the airlock corridor. By the time he arrived, the outer door was cycling. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, the inner door slid open. Myri stood there, still in her flight suit, a large pack slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were wide, taking in the grim corridor, then fixing on Junicio. She looked him up and down as if checking for injuries. "You look terrible," she said, her usual bluntness a comfort. "I feel better than I did a few hours ago," he replied. "Come on. I'll show you." He led her to the observation deck. The open doors poured starlight into the vast space, finally revealing the full, sad scale of the hangar and the Ulysses. Myri, the exoarchaeologist, gasped. But it wasn't a gasp of awe. It was a gasp of professional horror. "Oh, Junicio," she whispered, leaning on the railing. "Look at it. It's been butchered." From this vantage point, under the real light, the violence done to the ship was even clearer. The stripping was frantic, desperate. "They took everything that could be sold fast," she said, pointing. "Conduit, power relays, secondary hull plating. This wasn't decay. This was a robbery." "Who?" Junicio asked. "Who knows? Scavengers right after the silence, probably. Everyone was starving, desperate. They saw a warship and thought weapons or parts. They never knew what was inside." She turned to him, her face serious. "You said the affirmation. You're the keeper now." "I am." "Then show me the guardian." They went down to the main floor. The custodian stood in its usual place, a silent statue of light. As they approached, Myri slowed, her analytical eye missing nothing. The form is non-threatening. No sharp edges. The multiple arms suggest a purpose of manipulation, not combat. It's a tool, not a sword. "It calls itself a custodian-class guardian," Junicio said. "Its prime directive is preservation, of the core and of life." Myri nodded slowly, circling it at a respectful distance. "It didn't kill the vultures. It disassembled their tools. That is the most significant archaeological find of the century, Junicio. It tells us about the people who made it. They valued the thing they protected, but they also valued the potential of the thieves. That's a profound philosophy." She unloaded her pack, setting up her own scanners and data pads. For the next several hours, she worked. Junicio helped, following her instructions. They didn't touch the Ulysses. Instead, they studied everything around it. Myri took samples of the dust, analyzed energy signatures, and mapped the hangar with her equipment. Junicio, using his new awareness, guided her to the hidden terminal and other access points. He found he could ask the custodian for specific non-core data, and it would provide. "The hangar wasn't built for this ship," Myri announced, looking at her scans. "It was retrofitted, heavily. This was a military dry dock. They converted it into a high-security vault. All this," she gestured at the thick walls, "was added later. to hide the seed vault inside a warship's shell. A disguise. So the junk outside is the disguise, Junesio said. And it worked too well. Everyone who saw it thought it was just a dead warship and took the skin. No one looked for the heart. Exactly, Myri said. She looked excited, alive with discovery. This changes everything we know about the silence. We weren't just running. We were trying to save ourselves. Not just people, but our soul. Her communicator buzzed. She looked at it, and her face fell. It's the hospice. About Mr. Park. Junesio's stomach tightened. Put it on speaker. A nurse's voice, professional and calm, came through. Ms. Myri, you are listed as the secondary contact for Park Ji-hoon. He passed away 15 minutes ago. It was peaceful. His assets, according to his will, are now released to the named beneficiary. The legal notice has been sent. The call ended. The silence in the hangar felt different now. The last thread to the past was cut. Junesio was truly the keeper now. The only one. Myri put a hand on his shoulder. He held on long enough for you to find it. Long enough for you to say the words. Junesio looked at the custodian. Does it know? The custodian is aware of the life status of all previous keepers. The guardian itself answered. Park Ji-hoon's watch has ended. The continuity is preserved. The finality of it settled over Junesio. There was no going back. But looking at Myri, surrounded by her scanners and the glow of discovery, he didn't feel alone. We need a plan, he said, his voice finding new strength. We can't just guard it. We have to understand it. And we have to decide what to do with it. First, Myri said, we secure this place properly, not just with the custodian. We need to make it look uninteresting. We need a story. You're a salvager who bought a dud. You're slowly, and without profit, breaking down the hangar for scrap. It's a boring, long-term project. No one will care. Junesio nodded. That was smart. And the Ulysses? We study it. From the outside. We learn everything the custodian will let us learn about the legacy inside. We find out what ready means. And we look for others. Other keepers. Other seed vaults. Park Ji-hoon was one of 12 on a team. Maybe some of them survived and had children. Maybe there are other vaults, other custodians. We need to find them, Junesio. You're not just a keeper of one vault. You might be the first link in finding a network. A quiet network protecting the best of who we were. The idea was huge. It was terrifying. But for the first time it felt like a mission, not just a burden. They had a purpose. Junesio looked at the derelict ship, no longer seeing junk, but a shell. He looked at the custodian, no longer seeing a warden, but a partner. He had a friend, a goal, and a silent, powerful ally. The old warship was junk. But together they would protect the future inside it and maybe one day help it grow. Time moved differently in Hangar 7. The frantic fear was gone, replaced by a steady, quiet rhythm. Junesio no longer lived on Demeter 5 station. He moved his few belongings into a small, intact hab module off the main hangar corridor. It was sparse, but it was his. He was home. The first week was about building a believable lie. Following Myri's plan, he filed official paperwork with the station registry. He declared himself an independent salvager engaged in the long-term decommissioning of Structure Theta 7, Orion's Belt Yard. He listed the Ulysses as non-viable scrap to be processed last. It was boring. It was perfect. He paid a small fee for a low-power comms beacon that broadcast his new business status. To anyone looking, he was just another fool who'd bet on a bad deal and was now slowly paying for it with hard, lonely work. Myri came and went. She kept her job at the station's archive, which gave her access to historical databases and a reason to be away. But her real work happened in the hangar. She set up a lab in a side room, filled with scanners and data screens. Their first project was communication. Junesio needed to understand the custodian fully. He spent hours each day simply talking to it, asking questions. Can you project what is in the legacy? He asked one day. The custodian obliged. In the air above them, holograms flickered to life. Not warships or weapons, but other things. A forest of tall, green trees that Junesio had only seen in old pictures. The sound of a complex, beautiful music from 100 instruments. The pages of thousands of books, their text flowing like water. The DNA sequence of a simple honeybee. The architectural plans for a city that cared for all its people. Junesio watched, his heart aching. This was what they had lost. This was the dream Mr. Park had mentioned. It was overwhelming. Can anyone access this? If I allowed it? He asked. The Keeper controls all access. The data can be shared in whole or in part. The genetic material requires a biolab for reconstitution. The directive advises caution. Knowledge given too quickly, or to a culture not ready for it, can become a weapon. Junesio understood. Giving a starving person a single meal was help. Giving them the control key to a food synthesizer could create a tyrant. He was not just a guard. He was a filter. Meanwhile, Myri worked on the past. Using the access Junesio provided, she dug into the custodian's older logs, looking for clues about the other team members. She found fragments, a list of names, possible last-known locations, all places that were now dust or battlegrounds. It's a ghost hunt, she said, frustrated. The silence wiped the records clean. Keep looking, Junesio said. He was learning patience from the custodian itself. His days fell into a pattern. In the mornings, he did cover work. He used his salvage tools to carefully and noisily dismantle a non-essential part of the hangar's outer gantry, creating scrap metal to occasionally sell. It made his story real. In the afternoons, he learned. He studied basic ecology from the legacy files, understanding what a balanced world needed. He listened to the music and tried to understand the math that made it beautiful. He was not a scholar, but he was becoming a student. The custodian was his constant companion. It did not sleep. It did not eat. It simply was. Junesio learned to feel its presence not as a watchful eye, but as a pillar holding up his new world. He gave it simple commands. Adjust the atmospheric humidity. Run a full diagnostic on the hangar's radiation shields. To perform them instantly without comment. One evening, as they ate a meal together, Myri looked at him. You've changed, she said. How? You're calmer. You think before you speak. You look at a problem and you don't just see the fix, you see the consequences down the line. It's the custodian's influence. Its way of thinking is rubbing off on you. Junesio thought about it. She was right. He was no longer the desperate salvager looking for a quick score. He was a gardener, tending a seed that would not sprout for years, maybe lifetimes. 3 months after he said the affirmation, a new alert came. Not an intruder. A signal. A weak, automated ping on a frequency so old it was almost forgotten. The custodian detected it and brought it to Junesio's attention. It matches a designated emergency carrier wave from Seed Vault Project personnel, the custodian stated. Myri nearly knocked over her scanner. Where is it coming from? The custodian projected a star chart. The signal originated from a deep space sector, a place with no planets, only asteroids. Perfect place to hide. It's a looped recording, just a beacon. No life signs, Junesio said, reading the data. But it's a thread, Myri whispered, her eyes bright. Another thread. Junesio felt a surge of something new. It wasn't just purpose. It was hope. They were not alone. There were other remnants, other quiet guardians in the dark. His job was not just to protect his vault. It was to listen for the other whispers. That night he stood on the observation deck. The great doors were shut, but he had the external feeds on a screen. Stars shone, cold and constant. Below him, the Ulysses sat in its pool of light, a silent, battered shell. And beside him, the custodian stood, its gentle glow illuminating the deck. He had bought a hangar for 1 credit. The old warship inside was still junk, an empty disguise. But what guarded it was far more frightening, and far more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. It was a promise. A promise that destruction did not have to be the final answer. That preservation, patience, and care were their own kind of power. He was Junesio. He was a salvager. And he was the keeper of a silent, waiting future. He turned from the stars and went back to work. There was still so much to learn.